welcome to the deep dive. You've sent us quite the action flick to unpack this time, a movie called The Inside Job. Just from the title, it sounds like we are in for a wild ride, wouldn't you say?
Oh, for sure. The Inside Job, right off the bat, that just screams conspiracy. You know you're about to go deep into something, a betrayal, secrets. Makes you wonder right from the start just how deep this rabbit hole goes.
And based on the clip you sent in with all the high-stakes action and dialogue, it seems like we're in for a wild ride. So let's just jump into it, starting with the characters. We've got John Shaw. He's a police inspector, but he's haunted by something that happened. You see, his rookie partner died, and he's carrying around a lot of guilt, trauma. And that definitely plays a part in how he reacts when he uncovers this big conspiracy inside the police force.
It's really interesting, actually. I mean, you've got Shaw, who's dealing with all this, right, all this inner turmoil, these demons he's got to wrestle with. And at the same time, he's trying to navigate this system that's supposed to stand for justice, you know? But the more he looks into it, it just seems more and more corrupt. I think that duality makes him a really interesting character to follow, don't you?
Oh, for sure. It's like he's caught between a rock and hard place, and they're both closing in. Then you've got Tyler Burke, and he's the antagonist, this inspector who seems really successful, kind of ruthless even. But then you find out he's the bad guy. I thought it was a really interesting choice that the filmmakers made, him and Shaw close in the past. It adds a whole other level to their relationship to have that betrayal in there too.
Right. It's not just some ideological clash, it's personal. That past they had, that broken trust, it really highlights what the movie is trying to do with exploring loyalty, and ambition, especially when you bring power into the mix. It just makes you wonder how far someone would go to keep their secrets, even if it means throwing someone they used to be close to under the bus.
It's like a classic betrayal, but when the stakes are that high, it's even more intense. Then there is Agent Jenny Taylor. Now, she is fresh out of the academy, a rookie. I felt like they just threw her right into the deep end with this one, and she really shows what this whole conspiracy costs.
She does, she really does. It's like she represents this fresh set of eyes, this idealism, and it really contrasts with how cynical Burke has become and all the people caught up in his mess. She reminds you that there are people who still believe in the system even when it's falling apart around them. She ends up being a really powerful symbol in the movie, even though she's not the main character.
I know. It's almost like her being so naive just makes it even tenser, like you just want to warn her to run while she still can. Okay, so the plot. The story starts with Shaw, who is back on duty, and he finds this flash drive, but get this, it's disguised as a credit card.
Sneaky.
Right. But this little thing is full of evidence that Burke's been up to no good. Specifically, he's mixed up in drug trafficking with this guy, George Freemont, a criminal who's just died.
And that's the kicker. That's what sets everything off. It's like Shaw's whole world just explodes.
Yeah.
He has to confront this corruption, and it makes him a target.
And Burke, being as ruthless as he is, he doesn't just try to discredit Shaw, he goes into full-on lockdown mode. He locks down the whole police station. He even frames Shaw for the deaths of a bunch of officers, including Agent Taylor.
Talk about an escalation. Burke's actions, they just completely up the ante. I mean, he's desperate, right? He's got to maintain control, keep his secrets, and it sends the whole precinct into chaos. But what I thought was really interesting was how the lockdown changes the setting. It goes from a place that should represent safety, order, and turns into this pressure cooker, all suspicion and fear.
It becomes a battleground, and not just physically, but mentally too. And speaking of Burke escalating things, one of the scenes that stood out was the standoff between him and Shaw in the elevator.
Oh man, that elevator scene. Talk about tense. It's like they wanted to show you how different they were in that one place.
Yeah.
You've got Burke, who's willing to do whatever it takes to save himself, even if it means others have to pay the price.
Yeah.
And then you have Shaw, who everyone thinks is unstable, not reliable, but he's holding on to some sense of integrity. He's not going to let Burke win, even if it puts him in danger.
That whole scene had me on the edge of my seat. I mean, the way they filmed it in that tight space, the lights flickering it all, just added to the feeling that something bad was about to happen. You really felt trapped, just like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what I think makes the film so good. It's not just about the action, it's about what's going on in the characters' heads, how they react when things get tough. That elevator scene, it's like a tiny version of the whole movie's conflict. It's about those who abuse the law, who use it for themselves, and then those just trying to do the right thing, even when it feels impossible.
And you know what really gets you about that conflict is that the movie doesn't shy away from showing us how someone like Burke, ends up on that side of things. You see these little glimpses of his past, right? Like how he went from this promising young officer to, well, to this. He's ruthless, power-hungry. It's kind of like watching a train wreck. You can see it coming, but you can't do anything to stop it.
It's that classic story, someone starts out good, but then gradually their morals just erode. You can practically see the exact moment when they choose ambition over integrity, when they choose greed over doing what's right. What's really interesting is that the movie hints at things that might have pushed Burke in that direction. Remember that scene where he's showing off his house?
Oh yeah, that place was huge. I remember thinking, okay, how did a cop afford that? It just screamed dirty money.
Right. And it's not just the house itself. Think about what he says to Shaw in that scene. Looking at your house, I'd say you hid something from me. It's like he feels like he's missing something, like he's almost envious of how simple Shaw's life is, how he doesn't have all this baggage.
It's like he's trying to justify what he's done. Like, hey, I had to do what I had to do to get to where I am. But somewhere along the way, he lost himself.
And that's what elevates the film beyond a simple good cop, bad cop story. It makes you think about the system itself, the culture that allows someone like Burke to not just get away with it, but to flourish. It's not just about the bad things people do. It's about everyone who looks the other way, the silence that allows it all to just keep happening.
It's like a disease or something, and you can really see it in how the other officers react to Burke. Some are in on it, definitely, but others just seem to ignore it. Maybe they're scared, or maybe they just don't even care anymore.
Let's roll. Silence is deafening, It shows you how insidious corruption can be. It spreads to every corner. And then there's Agent Taylor. She's like this little spark of hope in the middle of it all. She still believes in the ideals, the ones Shaw is fighting so hard for.
She's like this breath of fresh air, especially in that environment. It's just heartbreaking, though, because you can see how her idealism is being chipped away the more she sees what's really going on.
Her story is tragic when you think about it. She comes in with all these expectations, so much faith in what the badge represents, and then the very system she believes in, well, it betrays her. Her death, I think that's a turning point for Shaw and for the movie.
Oh yeah, it's like a punch to the gut, honestly. It just makes everything feel so much more real. And you can see how it lights a fire under Shaw. He's even more determined to take Burke down. It's not just about him anymore, it's about her, about what she stood for.
And that's what makes that last showdown so powerful. Shaw's completely outmatched, but somehow he uses his knowledge of the police station, his understanding of how everything works, to outsmart Burke. It's like a David and Goliath story. Only David uses his brain to win.
He beats Burke at his own game. And that scene where he finally gets to Burke, the tension is unbelievable. I was on the edge of my seat. You want him to win so badly, but you can see how much it's cost him, all the lives lost, everything.
It's a victory, but it's bittersweet, for sure. And that's what makes this film so good. It doesn't try to simplify things, Justice is messy. It comes at a price. Shaw might have exposed the truth, but he's going to carry the scars of what happened, the physical ones and the emotional ones.
It just makes you wonder if it was worth it, if he can ever really come back from something like that.
That's the question, isn't it? The film doesn't really answer it, but it sticks with you. You keep thinking about it, about what happens to someone like Shaw after he's faced that kind of darkness. Can he ever really be at peace? Or will he always be haunted by what he's seen, by those he couldn't save?
It gives me chills just thinking about it. It's hopeful, but also heartbreaking.
That's exactly it. And that's the power of this movie. It stays with you, It makes you think about the complexities, even after it's over. It's not just entertainment, it makes you think.
And you know what else makes you think? Captain Matthews. He's a higher up, right? And he suspects Burke, too, but he's trying to do things the right way. It's interesting how his character changes the way you look at the whole corruption thing.
Definitely. Matthews, he represents a different kind of struggle, I think. He's fighting to change a system that's flawed, but he's trying to do it from the inside. He could have ignored everything, just protect his own job. But he believes Shaw, and he takes a stand. He's willing to put himself at risk to do the right thing.
It really makes you think about what you would do in that situation. It's inspiring in a way, He stands up to this massive, ingrained system. I mean, it's not your typical action movie, that's for sure. It makes you really think about, what's the right thing to do when there are no good choices, and how those choices, how they affect everyone.
It does make you think. You're right. The inside job, it gives you the action, but then it hits you with these questions. Like, what are your morals? What does power really mean? And how do you deal with the mental toll of fighting for what's right? It sticks with you, that's for sure.
No kidding. It sticks with you long after the credits have rolled. Speaking of which, I wanted to go back to the ending for a second. We've talked about how satisfying it is to see Shaw finally win, to expose Burke for what he is. But it's not all wrapped up in a bow, is it? There's this, I don't know, this uneasiness that just hangs there.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Don't get me wrong, it's a win for Shaw, but it comes at a cost. He's forced to kill Burke, and that's something that'll stay with him, even if it was justified.
That last scene with Shaw standing over Burke, I don't know, it sends chills down my spine. It's like you can feel the weight of everything he's been through, you know? It's this harsh reminder that doing the right thing doesn't erase the consequences.
It's a powerful image, for sure. And I think it goes back to what we were saying about sacrifice. Shaw, he sacrifices his peace of mind, his sense of security. And then, in the end, he sacrifices a life, even if it's to make things right. It makes you wonder, what's the real cost of justice?
And what about Shaw? What happens to him? He's in the clear, but what did it cost him? Can he ever really escape everything that happened?
That's the big question, isn't it? The movie doesn't really give you an answer, but it leaves you thinking. Can someone like Shaw, someone who's seen the worst of the worst, come back from that? Will those memories always haunt him?
It's hopeful in a way, but man, it's also heartbreaking.
It really is, and I think that's the mark of a good film, you know? It doesn't tie everything up neatly, it stays with you, it makes you think about the hard stuff, even after it's over. It's more than just a movie, it's an experience.
You know, for our listener who sent this in, we've broken down the plot, talked about the characters, even dissected that ending. But as you've pointed out, there's so much more to the inside job than just the pieces, right? It's a story about the choices we make, the systems that shape our lives, and I think about how hard it is to just do the right thing sometimes.
It's a reminder that corruption is everywhere. Even in the places and the systems that should protect us, it finds a way in. But the movie also shows you the incredible bravery it takes to stand up to those systems. People like Shaw, they risk everything to shine a light on the truth.
It reminds us that we all have a part to play, you know? We have to hold those in power accountable. We can't be afraid to speak up when something isn't right. And we have to support the people who are fighting the good fight, even when it's tough.
Sometimes, just knowing you're not alone in that fight is enough to make all the difference.
So true. Wow, this really has been quite the deep dive. And that's what's so great about these conversations, isn't it? It's not just about the movie or the show, it's about how it all connects back to us, to the world we live in.
That's the power of a good story, isn't it? They shine a light on things, they challenge our perspectives, they inspire us, and sometimes, just sometimes, they give us the courage to face our own battles, our own demons, and fight for a better future.
Beautifully said. And on that note, this is Deep Dive, reminding you to always look beyond the surface. Until next time.